The NFL Week 1 is in the books. John Clayton, Washington Post, is going to give us some observations on what he saw. Because after 1 week, it's hard to really label somebody. You stink, you're good, this team surprised me. There had to be some surprises. I mean, we talked, hey, I wasn't surprised with Arizona. I told you that team to watch out for. But I would imagine some people are looking at that team differently now than we did before. As we get closer to week number 2, midweek here, let's bring in John Clayton back to the show here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline as we look at week 1, the week that was in the NFL. John, welcome back. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good to be back.
Yeah, man. Well, I guess let's start with, is there something that surprised you that you did not expect in week 1?
A bunch. I mean, I didn't expect a Jacksonville Jaguar team with 55 players, 18 rookies, 6 undrafted players to end up beating the Indianapolis Colts by 6 points. And, Gardner Minshew, Mr. Stash, completing 19 of 20 passes. That's incredible. Never expected that. I never expected that you were going to see a Minnesota Viking team, although they made a lot of changes on defense, give up 43 points to Aaron Rodgers in a changed offense designed to run the football, and he throws for over 350 yards. Didn't expect that. I didn't expect a Cleveland Brown team that's underachieved for since Jim Brown was playing, underachieved to a point where they get blown out by 32 points by the Baltimore Ravens. I didn't expect that. I certainly didn't expect the Dallas Cowboys to have all the offensive talent that they have and go out to a Ram team that's, changed their almost the entire defense and be able to only score 17 points. And then certainly I kind of worried about the Eagles and the offensive line with 3 starters down going up against the Redskins, but 8 sacks, that surprised me. So there was a lot of surprises, I think, in week 1.
Yeah, you brought up some good ones there. I want to go to the Buccaneers because as you pointed out in your Washington Post article that the Saints reaffirmed their status as the favorites in the South. How big of a stranglehold do you think they have in that South division? They won that division going away last year. We all thought the Bucs might be there, but what did we take away from the Bucs game? I know it's only 1 week, but I don't know, do you have an opinion on what Brady looked like?
He didn't look good, that's for sure. And I think that you can see it in a couple of the teams that either change coaches or change quarterbacks, that you're not technically going to be on the same page in week 1. And so he made 2 very bad mistakes. One where he misread where Mike Evans was going, and another play, we just basically threw a short pass that got a pick 6. And that was just a bad decision, which he never tends to make. But I wouldn't overreact to the fact that they got a one-sided loss to them, because I think they're still good enough to win 10, 11 games. But it's not going to be like the 12 or 13 won by the Saints. Although what might have to happen now is you have to taper things back with the Mike Thomas injury in New Orleans, because if you take because they didn't have a lot at wide receiver last year other than Thomas, and now Thomas is gone and they have to rely more on Emmanuel Sanders, who's older. So there may be a little bit of a drop-off, but I think what it did show is that there's still a significant gap between the talent of the Saints and the talent of the Bucs, and what's probably understated is maybe the best claim of a waiver player in more than a year had to be getting Janoris Jenkins, because Jack Rabbit, along with Marcus Lattimore, is a phenomenal duo.
How about the Packers? Last year, people looked at this team and they saw a lot of wins, but they questioned, is this team legit? Well, you saw them play Minnesota in week 1, and they sure did look that way.
Yeah, well, they were legit, because anytime you have Aaron Rodgers and you add 2 pass rushers like they did with Azarius Smith and Preston Smith last year, you're legit. But what you start to look at is that, okay, are they better this year? All right, they had the 8-1 was their record again in one possession games. They had the easiest schedule in football. And what did they do this year? They lost 2 key starters, in Blake Martinez, who they replaced. The $10 million linebacker went to Cleveland, replaced him with Christian Kirksey, who's okay, 6.5. And then they let their $10 million right tackle, Brian Bulaga, go and for $10 million to the Chargers, and replaced him with Ricky Wagner. And Ricky Wagner at half the price wasn't even good enough he got to start only because of an injury. And he only brought in 10 new players and no new receivers. So you look at that and you say, how can they get to 13? Well, they're not going to get to 13, but at least they established in the Minnesota game, they're now still the best team in the division.
Yep, that one was another interesting one. That was, we had these division games early where we learned some things. But you're out there in Seattle, John Clayton, and they had that team. They should be on the East Coast. They never lose over here, but they really affirmed that team might be the best team in the West.
Oh yeah, no question. Because the debate's been, and most people take the angle that the 49ers were still better than Seattle. Well, you can't say that right now. I mean, don't write off the 49ers, but look what's going on with the 49ers. They're 3/4 of their secondary out pretty much because Richard Sherman went on injured reserve with a calf injury today. Artello Witherspoon has been a disappointment. He's in concussion protocol. Jason Verrett, he's got a hamstring injury. They're wiped out totally at wide receiver, and they can't even get Mohamed Sanu on the field until Friday in practice as long as he passed the COVID test. They're hurting at receiver, hurting at quarterback. And then you look at Seattle. I mean, Russell Wilson was unbelievable. 31 for 35. He 322 yards and 4 touchdowns. Offensive player of the week, having one of the best days in NFL history. And then their secondary is so good. I mean, I didn't realize how good Jamal Adams is. But I'm telling you right now, I mean, I know I can't vote for him in the Hall of Fame till 5 years after he retires, but right now he looks like a Hall of Famer. He is unbelievable. How about the fact he blitzed 11 times? He had 4 pressures. He had 1 sack. He had play after play after play, and you put him with Quentin Diggs and Bobby Wagner and all that stuff. This defense gave up a lot of yards, but they were meaningless yards. But this defense is going to be much better.
How do you think Seattle did this? They had their great defense before when Russell Wilson was on the rookie deal, and then they got the big contract. They kind of had to settle, a little bit of a refresh, but here they are. They're back at it, and it seemed like it happened so quickly.
Well, really, what it came down to was a strategy by John Snyder. And, you saw a year ago, what did the Packers do to improve their pass rush? They've paid 2 linebackers more than $10, $12 million a year to come in there. What they tried to be is economical, but making bold moves. They gave up a lot to get Jamal Adams, 2 first-round picks and a third and a starting safety. They got a 4th-rounder back, but it's a big hit. For 2 fifth-round picks to get 2 Pro Bowl caliber guys in the secondary. Quentin Diggs, a 2-time Pro Bowl alternate, and then a guy who struggled in his first game, Quentin Dunbar from Washington, for a 5th-round pick, but he was the number 2 coverage guy in the National Football League, according to Pro Football Focus. Then what they did is they were economical on the pass rush. And here's their thinking, because it's kind of a Bill Belichick thinking, as much as you want to pay the defensive lineman, it's sometimes better to go and get the secondary fix and be economical on the defensive line. So, for example, when they went and had their best year in 2013, they paid $6.5 million for Cliff Averill to come in, and they paid $4 million for Michael Bennett, and they had one of the greatest defensive years in NFL history. Well, I mean, you saw that what Belichick does, he let Trey Flowers go, he let Chandler Jones go. I mean, he would rather invest more in the secondary because you have more longevity in that. And so they get Bruce Irvin, who is still fast at the age of 32. Benson Mayowa looked good. He's had 20 career sacks. He had 1 on Sunday. And so, they didn't pay more than $5.5 million for either one of those players, but they got better than $5.5 million production.
He's John Clayton, Washington Post. Some observations in week 1. Baltimore looked great, and so did Jack. He looked like a better passer, too. I mean, 3 touchdowns, very efficient. Is that team better than the team that went 14-2 last year?
They are. And the reason they are is more on the defensive side of the ball. Now, we'll see how the impact of the Earl Thomas release is going to hurt them, because it will hurt them, because there's a big drop-off when you take away a future possible Hall of Fame free safety. Of course, a guy that didn't fit in there and they wanted him out of there. But also, they're better on the defensive line with pass rush. Calais Campbell and Derek Wolfe were great acquisitions, and so they benefit from that. So they're better on the front 7 on defense. They've got 2 great young linebackers. That's going to help. So they kind of mix experience with youth, and that's a good thing. They still have some issues on the offensive line. But you're right about Lamar Jackson. I mean, last year, he was as improved as any quarterback we've seen in the last several years in throwing from the pocket, something people thought it was going to take years for him to be able to fix. Now, if he can get the ball better downfield, then I think that you can see, he's back to being one of the top 6 quarterbacks in the league.
I do want to get your opinion on what happened here in Philly. You mentioned Washington earlier, but Wentz taking a lot of heat. Peterson didn't have a good day. Carson Wentz, 5th year, 28 years old. Is this just who he is, a guy who's inconsistent but can flash at times and gets hurt a lot? What is the overall impact or overview of who Carson Wentz is in his 5th year?
Yeah, I think he gets overly criticized. So I stick up for him on that point because, again, it's like, they talk about the injury factor. Sure, in the Super Bowl year, he got hurt, a legitimate injury, knocked him out for the year. But last year, he fought through the entire season with hardly anything at wide receiver, virtually nothing, and he got him into the playoffs. And the only thing that happened is that Jadeveon Clowney gave him a helmet hit, and that helmet hit knocked him out of a game with a concussion. Is that an injury-prone guy? Sure, he had the mono and all that different. Well, he didn't have the mono. Sam Darnold had the mono, but I think that he doesn't have a lot of weapons. It's an older team that's going to have to be broken up at the end of the year. And then when you take 3 starters out of the on the offensive line, what do you expect? 8 sacks coming from a team in Washington that's put 5 defensive linemen as first-round picks in the last 5 years. That was a matchup that you can see was going to be bad, but 8 sacks, that was really bad.
Yeah, that Washington team, John, has the feel of what San Francisco did out there, at that defensive front. I don't know that they're going to be a Super Bowl team, but maybe next year they take a jump. But that defensive front, they're fierce.
Yeah, but here's where the problem is, and this is what San Francisco experienced, and the Redskins will experience too. When you take 5 defensive linemen, how long can you keep them together? Like, for example, guys in the secondary. A cornerback, good one's going to make $14 million. Safety's going to make maybe $14 million. But if you're going to pay a defensive lineman, now you got to go $16 million for a tackle, $18 to $20 million for a defensive end. So it's hard to keep them together. And you saw the impact in San Francisco because they had to let Brunson Buckner go in a trade. They bring in Javon Kinlaw, and guess what? Without Buckner, they had trouble stopping the run. And so, you can keep 3/4 of the guys in the secondary longer than you can keep 3/4 of the guy on the defensive line. And you watch after the season. You're going to see, they're not going to bring back Simeon Thomas. He's going to be gone. They're going to have to probably cut D Ford because he's been a $17 million disappointment. And so you put so much on the defensive line that it eats up your cap when you're paying a quarterback, and you pay the price.
John, I could listen to you talk football all day, pal. Check out his 5 big takeaways from the NFL's opening weekend at the Washington Post, and he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Thank you so much, pal.
Hey, thank you.
All right, John Clayton, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.